North Korea and Kim Jong Un, are they actually a threat, or is it all just they're trying to scare the West and scare the UK and the US?
Yeah, I don't think they're a big threat. I mean, they've been a nuclear power now for sort of coming up sort of 20 years. The number one goal, I think, I mean, no one really knows, it's such a secretive regime, but I think the number one goal is maintaining the family in power. It's a family business. And the reason why the nuclear deterrent is so, Kim Jong-un calls it his treasured sword, is because that's what protects their sovereignty. That's what makes sure that they don't end up like an Iraq or like a Libya, where the West comes in, intervenes, overthrows the government and tries to change them. The nuclear weapons guarantee that, and the threat that they pose guarantees that. But I'm not sure they've got a lot. I mean, I don't think there's a lot of evidence from having a lot of global ambition beyond keeping themselves in power, keeping the regime in power. And the nuclear weapon secures that. But in terms of aggressive action in that region, I think that the risk posed by China and the risk posed by China over Taiwan is much greater than the risk posed by North Korea.
So obviously North Korea is, they're threatening the West. The US is having all its problems with the government shutdowns, and they're having some economic problems at the moment. There's obviously Russia at war with Ukraine, and China is a rising power now coming through. Who do you think the dominant power, the hegemon, will be in 10 years' time?
I guess I don't think there'll be one. I think Russia. I think that the threat from Russia is real. The military threat is real. But actually, as a global power, I sort of think that they're kind of overestimated. It's a bit of smoke and mirrors. It's a lot of noise, a lot of fuss, but actually, they're not posing a real systemic challenge to the West. Their economy is too weak. Their soft power, I think, is weak. Even domestically, they have to clamp down on dissent. They're not able really to allow that kind of that freedom. So I don't see Russia as a fundamental threat beyond isolated incidents. I think that China absolutely is. I don't think China will be a hegemon in sort of 10, 20 years' time, but they will be on the level of the US. And it will mean that these global institutions that were used to America dominating and getting their way in will not be the case anymore. That China will be using them as much for their interests as America is. I think India's probably overlooked a little bit just how powerful they are going to be. And I think that the West is slightly misreading India at the moment.
Well, India's sort of on both sides. They're with China and they're on that side of the globe, and then they're also in trade deals with the US and the West. So it's where they lie, I guess, that's where they're overlooking India.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a group of countries like this. Turkey is a NATO member, Brazil to a certain extent, but countries that we're sort of seeing as Western allies, even Saudi Arabia, but which in actual fact are just looking for what's best for them. And I think India falls into this category, that we're looking them still as a kind of democracy that's sort of on the Western side, that maybe can be a useful power against China. And they will come into conflict with China, no doubt, because as key emerging powers in the same region, they will just find their interests conflict. So I don't see a danger of a big kind of India-China alliance. I don't think that's likely at all. But I don't think that India is a reliable ally of the West. I think India will do what it thinks is best for India at any point in time. I think that the danger, a little bit like with Saudi Arabia as well, is that we sort of the West allows, we sort of overlook our values, or we water down our values and kind of overlook certain things, like human rights violations, because of the big power picture and wanting to make sure that they're on our side, the West side, rather than with China. But actually, I don't think they are anyway. So I think it's a little bit naive, and actually all we do is overlook things that we should probably care more about.
Now, it's the last question here, but it's a bit of a silly one. But obviously, Elon Musk recently bought Twitter, renamed it X. There's Bezos trying to launch rockets into outer space. Will the world be ruled by mega corporations in the future?
Yeah, I mean, there's this story recently, and you might have know more about this than me, but that the Ukrainian army or the Ukrainian government had asked Elon Musk to switch on this, is it Star Network?
Starlink.
That he has.
It's sort of it's a Wi-Fi that can go anywhere, because all you need is the little it's almost like a dish like you'd have on the top of your house. It's almost like one of those, and you just stick it in the ground and it reaches all of his many satellites he's put up with SpaceX.
So my understanding was that Ukraine had asked him to activate this in Crimea so that they could attack Russia, and he basically said no, because he didn't want to be complicit in a possible war crime. I mean, the fact that companies and one individual as the CEO of a company are already deciding whether one country is able to attack another country or not kind of suggests maybe we're further down this line than we think. Yes and no. Like they won't sort of rule the world in a military sense, in a conventional sense, maybe in the way that we're used to seeing, sort of armies. I don't think that's likely. I don't think we're going to see an Amazon army, sort of taking over it. But the truth is, they don't need to. That's not how their power works. They're already able to dictate things like tax. You should look at Amazon operating from Luxembourg for tax reasons, and not only do they get a sort of secretive tax deal, well, it's just that it's secretive. The government gives them a good tax deal and agrees not to publish it and make it public. So we don't even know exactly what they get out of being there. So I guess the answer, I think, is that to a certain extent they already are. It just doesn't look like what we're used to seeing in terms of countries ruling the world, and that's only going to increase.
Well, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
It's been a great interview.